"Please let me stay, I'll work hard," she cried, her voice breaking against the wind. But the silent Modoc warrior, with scars like war paint, only stared at her with eyes dark as midnight, then spoke words that would change everything. "If you're brave enough, come with me. Northern California Territory." Spring of 1867, the morning came without mercy. Grey clouds hung low over the trading post at Tule Lake, pressing down on the wooden buildings like a heavy hand. Smoke from breakfast fires mixed with fog, turning the air thick and bitter. The settlement was small, just a collection of rough-hewn structures clinging to the edge of Modoc land, where white settlers and native traders met to exchange furs, tobacco, and whispered rumors. Abigail Monroe stood outside the post office, her traveling coat torn at the sleeve, her dark hair falling loose from pins that had given up days ago. In her trembling hands, she clutched a carpet bag that held everything she owned in this world. 2 dresses, a silver locket with her mother's portrait, $3 in coins, and a train ticket to nowhere that she could no longer afford to use. She'd been standing there since dawn, watching people come and go. Trappers with beaver pelts slung over their shoulders, merchants haggling over the price of ammunition, women in clean aprons carrying baskets of bread. Everyone had somewhere to belong. Everyone except her stomach twisted with hunger. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, when she'd spent her last 20 cents on a piece of hardtack that had tasted like sawdust and desperation. The coin purse in her bag was empty now, empty like her future, empty like the promises that had brought her west in the first place. 3 months ago, Abigail had been a schoolteacher in Boston, respectable, safe, engaged to a banker named Howard Pendleton who wore starched collars and spoke about investments with the passion other men reserved for love. She had believed in that life, in its neat predictability, until the day she discovered Howard's ledgers. Numbers that didn't add up, money disappearing from widows' accounts, from orphanages, from people who trusted him. When she confronted him, he had smiled that cold smile and told her that if she spoke a word, he would ruin her. He would tell everyone she was mad, hysterical, a woman whose jealousy had driven her to lies. So she had run, taken what money she had saved and bought a ticket west, thinking distance would equal safety. But Howard had connections everywhere, tendrils of influence that reached across state lines. 2 weeks ago, she had received a telegram at a boarding house in Sacramento. "I know where you are. Come back and this ends quietly. Run again and I will find you." She had left that same night, traveling by stagecoach to this remote trading post, hoping to disappear into the wilderness where men like Howard Pendleton didn't venture. But now her money was gone. The stagecoach had taken her last dollars, and this rough settlement offered nothing to a woman alone, except suspicion and propositions she would rather starve than accept. She straightened her shoulders and walked toward the general store. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. Inside, the air smelled of coffee beans, leather, and tobacco. A man behind the counter, thick-bearded and red-faced, looked up from his newspaper. His eyes traveled over her torn coat, her muddy boots, her desperate expression, and his face hardened. "We don't give credit," he said before she could speak. "I'm not asking for credit," Abigail said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I'm looking for work. I can read and write. I can keep accounts, teach children, sew, cook, anything honest." The man snorted. "Honest work?" He folded his newspaper slowly, deliberately. "What's a Boston lady doing out here looking for honest work?" "Running from something, I'd wager." Heat rushed to Abigail's cheeks. "My circumstances are my own. I'm simply asking if you know of anyone who needs help." "There's help, and then there's the kind of help men want from women who show up alone with torn dresses and empty pockets." His grin was ugly. "Sally's place down by the creek always needs girls. You'd make good money there, pretty thing like you." Abigail's hands clenched around her carpetbag. "I said honest work." "Then you're in the wrong place, miss." He turned back to his newspaper, dismissing her. "Try the Mission if you want charity. Though I hear they're full up with hard luck cases." She left without another word, the bell chiming mockingly behind her. Outside, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing the jagged peaks of the mountains in the distance. beautiful and indifferent. The world didn't care if she survived or perished. It simply turned, grinding the desperate beneath its wheel. Abigail moved from building to building. The blacksmith said he had no work for women. The saloon keeper laughed in her face. The seamstress took one look at her threadbare coat and shook her head. "I can barely feed myself," the woman said, not unkindly. "Come back if you find money for fabric. I'll teach you patterns." By midday, Abigail's feet ached, and her hope had worn thin as paper. She found herself standing near the edge of the settlement, where the wooden buildings gave way to open ground, and the land belonged to no one and everyone. A group of men had gathered near a wagon, voices raised in argument. She moved closer, drawn by the commotion. "You can't just take our supplies," a man in a suit was saying, his face purple with indignation. "We paid for safe passage through this territory." Across from him stood 3 Modoc warriors. They were lean and hard, dressed in a mix of traditional buckskin and traded cloth, their faces painted with red ochre and black ash. The tallest of them held a rifle loosely in one hand, his expression carved from stone. This was not a negotiation. This was a statement. "You cross our land," the warrior said in careful English. "You pay, or you turn back. This is American territory now," the suited man sputtered. "You savages don't own anything anymore." The word hung in the air like a slap. The warrior's eyes narrowed, but he didn't raise his voice. He simply lifted the rifle an inch. The message was clear. One of the other settlers, a younger man with a pistol on his hip, reached for his weapon. Everything slowed. Abigail saw it happening, saw the way the warrior's finger moved toward the trigger, saw the crowd beginning to scatter. And without thinking, she stepped forward. "Wait," she called out, her voice cutting through the tension. Every eye turned to her. "Wait, please." The suited man stared at her as if she'd sprouted wings. "Woman, get back. This doesn't concern you." But Abigail ignored him. She looked directly at the tall warrior, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He's wrong," she said clearly. "This is your land. It's always been your land. These men should pay for crossing it, or they should leave." Silence fell like a thunderclap. The suited man's face went from purple to white. "You traitorous." "I'm not a traitor for speaking the truth," Abigail said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Your people made treaties and broke them. You took what wasn't yours and called it progress. If these men want safe passage, they should pay what's asked." The warrior studied her with eyes that gave nothing away. Dark, fathomless, weighing her words against a lifetime of broken promises from white faces. Then he spoke, not to her, but to his companions in their own language. They responded, voices low and quick. The suited man grabbed Abigail's arm, his fingers digging in hard. "You stupid woman, you'll get us all killed. Let her go." The warrior's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The suited man released her immediately, stepping back. The warrior gestured to his companions. They lowered their weapons. Then he looked at Abigail again, and something flickered in his expression. Not gratitude, but recognition. As if he had seen something unexpected and was still deciding what it meant. "You speak for these men?" he asked her. "No," Abigail said quickly. "I speak only for myself. And for what's right." "What's right?" He repeated the words as if tasting them. Then he turned to the suited man. "You pay 3 horses. Then you cross 3 horses? That's robbery." The warrior said nothing. He simply waited. The settlers conferred in furious whispers. Finally, they led 3 horses forward. The warriors took them without ceremony and disappeared back toward the tree line, moving like shadows despite the bright daylight. The crowd dispersed quickly, eager to forget what had happened. Only Abigail remained standing there, her heart still racing. She had just defended Modoc warriors against white settlers. She had made herself an enemy to her own people. And for what? For principle, for truth. In this world, those things brought you nothing but trouble. She turned to walk back toward the settlement, but stopped. The tall warrior had returned. He stood at the edge of the clearing, watching her with that same unreadable expression. Abigail's throat went dry. Had she offended him somehow? Was he angry that she had interfered? She clutched her carpet bag tighter, preparing to run, though she knew she wouldn't get far, but he didn't approach. He just stood there, a dark figure against the green wilderness, studying her as if she were a puzzle he hadn't yet solved. Then he turned and vanished into the trees. That night, Abigail slept in a corner of the stable, curled up in the straw with her carpet-bag as a pillow. The stable-master had taken pity on her after she offered to muck out the stalls in exchange for shelter. It was cold, and it smelled of horses and manure, but it was better than the open ground. She woke to rough hands shaking her. Dawn light filtered through the cracks in the walls. The stable-master stood over her, his face grim. "You need to leave." Now, Abigail sat up, disoriented.
"What? Why?"
"Word got around about what you did yesterday. Folks don't take kindly to white women defending savages. The council met last night. They want you gone by sunup." Cold dread settled in her stomach. "Gone where?" "I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem, miss. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't kind either. Just practical. You made your choice. Now you live with it." 20 minutes later, Abigail stood at the edge of the trading post with her carpet-bag and nothing else. The sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful and terrible. She had no money, no food, no shelter. The wilderness stretched out before her, vast and indifferent. She started walking. Not toward the road that led back to civilization, but toward the tree line. Toward Modoc land. It was insane. It was suicide. But what choice did she have? The settlers had cast her out. Maybe, just maybe, the people she had defended would show her more mercy than her own kind. The forest swallowed her within minutes. Towering pines blocked out the sun, turning day into twilight. The ground was soft with pine needles and moss. She walked for what felt like hours, following game trails that led deeper into the wilderness. Her feet blistered, her stomach cramped with hunger. But she kept moving, because stopping meant giving up, and she wasn't ready to give up yet. She didn't see them until they wanted to be seen. One moment she was alone on the trail. The next, 3 Modoc warriors stepped out from behind trees surrounding her. Abigail's breath caught. These weren't the same men from yesterday. These warriors were younger, their faces hard with suspicion. One of them said something in their language, sharp and questioning. Abigail raised her hand slowly. "I don't understand." "I'm looking for the warrior from yesterday," the tall one. "I need to speak with him." They exchanged glances. Then one of them grabbed her carpet-bag, dumping its contents onto the ground. Her dresses fell into the dirt. The silver locket bounced and lay open, her mother's painted face staring up at the sky. They rifled through her belongings, finding nothing of value. "Please," Abigail said, her voice shaking now. "Please, I just need help. I defended your people yesterday. I have nowhere else to go." One of the warriors laughed, a sound without humor. He said something that made the others grin. Then they turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her possessions scattered in the dirt. Abigail fell to her knees. This was it then. This was how it ended. Cast out by settlers, rejected by the natives, alone in a forest that would claim her bones and forget her name. She gathered her things with trembling hands, stuffing them back into the carpet-bag. The locket's chain had broken. She held it in her palm, staring at her mother's face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't stronger." A shadow fell across her. Abigail looked up and her heart stopped. The tall warrior from yesterday stood over her. Up close, she could see the scars that marked his face, 3 parallel lines running from his temple to his jaw. War paint or wounds, she couldn't tell. His eyes were darker than she remembered, deeper, holding secrets and sorrows she would never understand. This was Black Elk, though she didn't know his name yet. Warrior, hunter, protector of his people. A man who had watched his world shrink year by year as white settlers pushed deeper into Modoc land. A man who had buried a wife and child 3 winters ago when sickness swept through their village. A man who spoke little because words had failed to stop the flood of change, and only action mattered now. He looked at the broken locket in her hand, at her tear-stained face, at the carpet-bag clutched to her chest like a shield. Then he spoke, his voice low and rough as distant thunder. "Why did you speak for us?" Abigail wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because it was the truth. Because your people deserved respect, The truth. He said the word the same way he had yesterday, testing its weight. White people do not speak truth to us. They speak promises, then break them. They speak peace, then bring war. I know, Abigail said quietly. I know what my people have done. I'm ashamed of it. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He crouched down so they were at eye level. This close, she could see the details that distance had hidden. The silver beads woven into his hair. The leather cord around his neck, hung with a small carved bear. The way his hands bore calluses from a lifetime of hard use. You have no people now, he said. It wasn't a question. Abigail shook her head. No people. The settlers cast you out because you spoke for us. Yes, and now you come here. Looking for what? Mercy? Shelter? Food. His voice held no mockery, only curiosity. I don't know, Abigail admitted. I don't know what I'm looking for. I just know I can't go back. Black Elk was silent for a long moment. Then he stood extending his hand to her. When she took it, his grip was strong and warm. He pulled her to her feet effortlessly. They stood there, white woman and Modoc warrior, surrounded by ancient trees and the weight of history between their peoples. Please let me stay, Abigail said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I'll work hard. I can cook, clean, teach. I can learn your ways. I won't be a burden. Please, I have nowhere else to go. Black Elk studied her face as if reading a map, looking for deception, for weakness, for the lies that white people always seem to carry like weapons. But whatever he saw in her eyes made him nod slowly, a decision settling into place. If you're brave enough, he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of warning and promise. Come with me. Black Elk moved through the forest like water, silent and sure-footed, following paths that Abigail couldn't see. She struggled to keep up, her city boots slipping on moss-covered rocks, branches catching at her hair and torn coat. He never looked back to check if she followed. Either she would keep pace, or she wouldn't. The wilderness made no allowances for weakness. They walked for over an hour, climbing steadily upward into the mountains. Abigail's legs burned, and her lungs ached from the thin air, but she bit down on her complaints and pushed forward. She had asked for this. She had begged for this chance. Showing weakness now would prove every doubt right. The trees began to thin, and suddenly they emerged into a clearing beside a crystal lake that reflected the sky like polished glass. Abigail stopped, breathless not from exertion but from beauty. The water was so clear she could see smooth stones on the bottom, and beyond the lake a village spread across the valley floor. 20 or 30 structures made of tule reeds and wooden frames stood in careful arrangement, smoke rising from cooking fires. Children played near the water's edge, their laughter carrying across the distance. Women worked at grinding stones, their movements rhythmic and practiced. Men repaired fishing nets and checked weapons. This was a living community, organized and purposeful, nothing like the savage chaos white settlers always described. Black Elk started down the slope toward the village. Abigail followed, suddenly aware of how she must look. A white woman, disheveled and desperate, being led into a Modoc village by one of their warriors. She saw heads turn, conversations stop. A woman dropped the basket she was carrying. A man reached for the knife at his belt. The entire village seemed to freeze as they entered. Abigail kept her eyes down, following close behind Black Elk as he walked toward the center of the settlement. An older woman emerged from the largest structure, her face lined with age and wisdom, her gray hair braided with shells and feathers. She wore a dress of deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork, and when she moved, she carried authority like a physical presence. Black Elk stopped and spoke to her in their language, his words flowing quick and respectful. The old woman listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes moving from Black Elk to Abigail and back again. When he finished, silence stretched long and heavy. Then the old woman stepped forward. She walked a slow circle around Abigail, studying her from every angle. Abigail stood very still, hardly daring to breathe. The woman reached out and touched Abigail's hands, turning them over to examine the palms. Soft hands, city hands. Hands that had never built a fire from scratch or skinned a deer or woven a basket. Useless hands. The old woman said something sharp. Black Elk responded, his tone firm but not argumentative. A younger warrior stepped forward, speaking rapidly and gesturing toward Abigail with clear hostility. Others joined in, voices rising in what was clearly a heated debate. Abigail didn't need to understand the words to know they were arguing about her fate. Finally, the old woman raised her hand. Silence fell instantly. She spoke a single sentence, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment. Then she turned and walked back to her dwelling without another word. Black Elk touched Abigail's shoulder, guiding her toward a smaller structure at the edge of the village. Inside, it was dim and cool, with a fire pit in the center and sleeping mats arranged along the walls. A small boy sat near the fire, no more than 5 years old, carving a piece of wood with intense concentration. He looked up when they entered, his eyes going wide. Black Elk knelt beside the boy, speaking softly. The child listened, then looked at Abigail with curiosity rather than fear. Black Elk gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself carefully onto one of the mats, still clutching her carpet bag. "This is Little Sage," Black Elk said, the first words he'd spoken since they left the forest. "My sister's son. She died 2 winters past. He lives with me now." Abigail looked at the boy, saw the familiar shadow of loss in his young eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I lost my mother too. It's a hard thing." Little Sage didn't respond, but something in his posture softened slightly. He went back to his carving, stealing glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. Black Elk stood near the doorway, arms crossed. "The council says you may stay. For now, but you must prove your worth. You must learn our ways. You must work harder than anyone. And if you bring trouble to this village, you will be sent away. Do you understand?" "Yes," Abigail said immediately. "Yes, I understand. Thank you. I won't let you down." He studied her for a long moment. "We will see. Rest now. Tomorrow, your work begins." He left, and Abigail was alone with Little Sage, and the dying light filtering through the reed walls. She set down her carpet bag and looked around the small dwelling that was now impossibly her home. The fire crackled softly. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the village settling into evening routines. Somewhere, someone was singing. Little Sage finished his carving and held it up. It was a small bird, rough but recognizable. He offered it to her shyly. Abigail took it, feeling the weight of the gesture. This was more than a carved bird. This was a child offering trust to a stranger. She closed her fingers around it carefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful." The boy smiled, just a flicker, then returned to his work. And for the first time in months, Abigail felt something that might have been hope. The next morning began before dawn. Abigail woke to the sound of the village stirring, people moving with quiet purpose in the pre-dawn darkness. She sat up, disoriented, then remembered where she was. Little Sage's sleeping mat was already empty. Outside, smoke rose from rekindled fires. A woman appeared in the doorway, younger than the elder but still older than Abigail, with a face that showed no welcome. She gestured sharply for Abigail to follow. No words, just the command in her eyes. Abigail scrambled to her feet, smoothing down her wrinkled dress, and hurried after her. The woman led her to the lakeshore, where several other women were already working. Some were washing clothes in the cold water. Others were gathering reeds. The woman thrust a basket into Abigail's hands and pointed to the reed beds. Her meaning clear: harvest, gather, work. Abigail waded into the shallows, gasping as the icy water soaked through her boots and dress hem. The other women watched her struggle, their faces impassive. She reached for a reed and pulled, but it didn't break cleanly. She tried again, wrenching at it, and nearly fell backward into the water. Someone laughed, quickly stifled. The woman who had brought her here waded over and demonstrated the proper technique. A sharp twist, a clean pull, using the strength of the whole body, not just the arms. Abigail watched carefully and tried again. This time the reed came free. The woman nodded once, not quite approval, but acknowledgement. For hours, Abigail worked in the cold water, her hands going numb, her back aching from the unfamiliar posture. The other women moved with practiced efficiency, their baskets filling quickly, while hers remained stubbornly sparse. But she didn't stop. Didn't complain. She pulled reed after reed, even when her fingers began to bleed from the sharp edges, even when her legs trembled with cold and exhaustion. By midday, when the sun finally warmed the air, Abigail had filled her basket. It wasn't as full as the others, and the reeds weren't as neatly bundled, but it was something. She carried it back to shore, her wet dress clinging to her legs, and set it down with the others. The older woman who had taught her the technique looked at the basket, then at Abigail's bleeding hands. She said something in Modoc that Abigail didn't understand, but her tone had shifted. Less contempt, more consideration. She pulled a small jar from her pouch and gestured for Abigail to hold out her hands. The salve she rubbed into the cut stung fiercely, but Abigail didn't flinch. The woman watched her face, testing, and when Abigail met her eyes steadily, something passed between them. Not friendship, but a tentative respect. That afternoon, Abigail was put to work grinding acorns into flour. The grinding stone was heavy, and the motion repetitive, and her arms screamed with fatigue after the first hour. But she kept going, watching how the other women moved, trying to match their rhythm. Little Sage appeared at some point, sitting nearby and watching her with solemn eyes. When she paused to wipe sweat from her forehead, he brought her a gourd of water, without being asked. Abigail drank gratefully, touched by the small kindness. Evening came, and with it, communal dinner. The village gathered around a central fire, families sitting together, sharing food from wooden bowls. Abigail hung back, unsure where she belonged, but Little Sage tugged at her hand and pulled her to sit beside him and Black Elk. The warrior was cleaning his rifle, his movements methodical and precise. He didn't look at her when she sat down, but he pushed a bowl of stew in her direction. The food was unlike anything Abigail had eaten before. Some kind of fish mixed with roots and herbs she couldn't identify. It was hot and savory, and she was so hungry that it tasted like the finest meal she'd ever had. She ate slowly, trying to show proper manners, but her stomach growled with desperate need. Little Sage giggled at the sound. Around the fire, people talked and laughed, their voices rising and falling in the musical cadence of the Modoc language. Abigail understood none of it, but she listened anyway, trying to pick out patterns, repeated words, anything that might help her learn. Black Elk spoke occasionally, his deep voice cutting through the chatter, and people listened when he talked. He had authority here, she realized. Respect earned through action, not birth. After dinner, the old woman from yesterday approached. Up close, her face was even more striking, weathered by years but still beautiful in its strength. She sat down across from Abigail and spoke in careful, heavily accented English. "I am Grandmother Willow. I lead this village. Black Elk tells me you defended our people against white settlers." Abigail nodded. "Yes, Grandmother." "Why?" The question was direct, piercing, because what they were doing was wrong. "Your people have every right to ask for payment to cross your land. The settlers have taken so much already." Grandmother Willow's eyes narrowed. "Pretty words. But words are cheap. White people speak many words, always promising, always lying." "I know," Abigail said quietly. "I know my people have broken every promise. I can't change that. I can only show you through my actions that I mean what I say." "Actions?" Grandmother Willow nodded slowly. "Yes, actions matter. You worked today, you bled. You did not cry or complain. This is good, but one day means nothing. Can you do this every day? Can you leave behind your white ways and learn ours?" Abigail met the old woman's fierce gaze. "I will try with everything I have. I have nowhere else to go, and even if I did, I think I would still choose to be here. To learn from you." Something flickered in Grandmother Willow's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "We will see. Sleep now. Tomorrow will be harder." The old woman stood and walked away, leaving Abigail with those ominous words hanging in the air. Black Elk, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "She likes you. If she didn't, you would already be gone." Abigail looked at him in surprise. "That was her liking me?" "Yes." The corner of his mouth might have twitched. might have been the beginning of a smile, but then it was gone, and he returned to cleaning his rifle. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of exhausting work and slow learning. Abigail woke before dawn and worked until after dark, her hands constantly busy with tasks she had never imagined doing. She learned to weave baskets from tulle reeds, her fingers clumsy at first, but gradually gaining skill. She learned to prepare acorn flour, a process that required leaching out the bitter tannins through repeated washings. She learned to repair the reed houses when winter winds damaged them, to gather firewood and stack it properly for drying, to recognize edible plants and avoid poisonous ones. The work was relentless and her body protested every day. Blisters formed and burst and formed again. Her shoulders ached from carrying heavy loads. Her knees hurt from kneeling at grinding stones. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, she grew stronger. The soft city hands became calloused and capable. The weak arms developed muscle. The quick exhaustion gave way to endurance. The village women watched this transformation with grudging approval. They no longer corrected her quite so sharply. Sometimes they even showed her easier ways to accomplish tasks, sharing the wisdom of generations. One woman, called Morning Dove, taught her how to identify the best reeds for basket weaving. Another, named Sky Woman, showed her how to gut and clean fish with efficient practice strokes. These were not friendships, not yet, but they were something. Small bridges built across a vast cultural divide. Little Sage became her constant companion when his own tasks allowed. He appointed himself her teacher in the Modoc language, pointing at objects and saying their names, then making her repeat them until she got the pronunciation right. His patience far exceeded his years. When she stumbled over words, he would giggle but never mock, always encouraging her to try again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Black Elk remained a steady, silent presence. He provided for her basic needs without fanfare, brought her warmer clothing when the mountain nights grew cold, made sure she had enough food, checked that her shelter remained secure. But he never pushed himself into her space, never demanded anything, never made her feel like his charity came with strings attached. He simply existed at the periphery of her new life, watching, waiting, judging her worthiness through observation rather than interrogation. One evening, 3 weeks after her arrival, Abigail sat outside the dwelling she now shared with Black Elk and Little Sage, working on a basket by firelight. Her fingers moved with growing confidence through the familiar motions. Weave, tuck, pull tight. Weave, tuck, pull tight. The rhythm was meditative, allowing her mind to wander. Black Elk emerged from the forest, carrying a freshly killed deer across his shoulders. He moved with such ease that the animal's weight seemed nothing. He dropped it near the fire and began the work of butchering, his knife flashing in the firelight. Little Sage ran over to watch, fascinated as always by his uncle's skill. Abigail continued her weaving, but she found herself watching too. The way Black Elk's hands moved with precise purpose. The way he explained each cut to Little Sage in their language, teaching as he worked. The way firelight caught in his dark hair and cast shadows across those 3 scars on his face. She wondered again about those scars. Were they from battle? From a bear? From some ritual she didn't understand? And as if sensing her gaze, Black Elk looked up. Their eyes met across the fire. For a moment neither looked away. Abigail felt something shift in her chest, a strange warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. Then Little Sage said something that made Black Elk smile, truly smile, and the moment broke. But something had changed. Some invisible line had been crossed, and Abigail knew with sudden certainty that her life had altered in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The next morning brought visitors. Abigail was grinding acorns when she heard shouting from the edge of the village. She looked up to see 3 white men on horseback riding into the settlement, rifles clearly visible in their saddle holsters. The entire village stopped working, every eye turning toward the intruders. Black Elk appeared from his dwelling, and other warriors materialized from various directions. forming a protective barrier between the riders and the rest of the village. Abigail's stomach clenched with dread. She recognized the lead rider. It was one of the men from the trading post, one of the settlers who had been there during the confrontation that had changed everything. The man's eyes swept over the village until they landed on Abigail. His face split into a cruel grin. Well, found you. Heard you were hiding out here with the savages. Playing squaw now, Miss Monroe? Abigail stood slowly, her hands clenched at her sides. Leave, you have no business here. Oh, but I do. The man leaned forward in his saddle. Got a telegram for you. From a Mr. Howard Pendleton in Boston. Says he's your fiancé. Says you stole money from him and ran. Says there's a substantial reward for information about your whereabouts. The world tilted. Howard had found her. Of course he had. Men like Howard always found what they were looking for. They had money and connections and relentless determination. Abigail felt the eyes of the village on her, questioning, suspicious. What other lies had this white woman brought to their home? He's lying, Abigail said, her voice shaking. I stole nothing. I discovered he was embezzling from his clients, and when I confronted him, he threatened me. Everything I told you was true, the rider shrugged. Not my concern whether it's true or not. I'm just here to collect the reward. You're coming back with us, Miss Monroe, peacefully or not so peacefully. Your choice. Black Elk stepped forward, moving between Abigail and the horses. When he spoke, his voice was cold as winter ice. She stays. The rider's hand moved toward his rifle. You don't want to do this, Chief. We got the law on our side. She's a wanted woman. Your law means nothing here. Black Elk's hand rested on the knife at his belt. Behind him, the other warriors readied their weapons. The tension stretched tight as a bowstring, one wrong word away from violence. Abigail's mind raced. If she stayed, these men might attack the village. People could die because of her. But if she went with them, she would be returned to Howard, to his lies and his control, and his carefully constructed cage. There was no good choice, only degrees of terrible. She stepped around Black Elk, ignoring his sharp sound of protest. I'll go with you, she said clearly. Just leave the village alone. Abigail, no. Black Elk's voice was rough with emotion she'd never heard from him before. She met his eyes, trying to convey everything she couldn't say. Thank you. I'm sorry. You gave me something precious, even if it was only for a little while. Then she turned back to the riders. Let's go. But before anyone could move, Grandmother Willow walked into the center of the confrontation. The old woman moved slowly, leaning on a walking stick, but her presence commanded absolute attention. She looked at the riders with contempt, then turned to Abigail. You claim she broke white law, Grandmother Willow said in her heavily accented English. But she stands on Modoc land now, under our protection, under our law. If you want her, you must prove your claim to the council. The lead rider laughed. You don't have authority here, old woman. This is American territory. Is it? Grandmother Willow's eyes flashed. Then where is your treaty? Where is the paper that says you own this valley? You speak of law, but you follow none. You are trespassers, and on our land we decide what is just. The riders looked at each other uncertainly. They had come expecting easy prey, not organized resistance. The lead man's face darkened. You're making a mistake. When we come back, we'll have soldiers. Then bring soldiers, Black Elk said quietly. Bring your whole army. She stays. The riders held their position for a long, tense moment. Then, seeing the determination in the faces around them, they turned their horses and rode away. But their departure felt less like retreat and more like postponement. They would be back, Abigail knew. And next time, they would bring force. As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Abigail felt her legs give out. She sank to the ground, trembling. Black Elk knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. Little Sage pressed against her other side. Around them, the village slowly returned to normal rhythms, but Abigail knew everything had changed. She had brought danger to these people. Her past had followed her here, contaminating this place that had offered her sanctuary. She looked up at Black Elk, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I should never have come here. I put you all in danger. Black Elk's dark eyes held hers. "You think you chose to come here? You think any of this was accident?" He shook his head. "The spirits brought you here for a reason, and we do not turn away those under our protection, no matter the cost." Grandmother Willow's shadow fell across them. "The council will meet tonight. We will decide what is to be done. For now, child, rest. You have proven yourself one of us, and we protect our own." As the old woman walked away, Abigail felt something break open inside her chest. These people, who had every reason to hate her kind, who had suffered generations of betrayal and violence from white settlers, had just risked everything to protect her. A woman they barely knew. A woman from the people who had taken their land and destroyed their way of life. She had spent her whole life among her own people and never felt truly seen, truly valued. But here, among strangers who had become something more, she had found what she'd been searching for all along. She had found home. The council fire burned high that night, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the village elders who sat in a solemn circle. Abigail knelt at the center, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. The air smelled of sage smoke and pine resin, ceremonial scents that marked this as more than mere conversation. This was judgment. Grandmother Willow sat directly across from her, flanked by two other elders, an ancient man whose face was a map of wrinkles, and a woman with silver-streaked hair who wore a necklace of bear claws. Black Elk stood outside the circle with the other warriors, present but not permitted to speak unless called upon. His eyes never left Abigail's face. The old man spoke first, his voice like dried leaves rustling. He spoke in Modoc for several minutes, occasionally gesturing toward Abigail, his tone grave. When he finished, the woman with the bear claw necklace responded, her words sharp and rapid. Back and forth they debated, while Abigail sat motionless, understanding nothing but feeling everything. Finally, Grandmother Willow raised her hand. Silence fell like a curtain. She looked at Abigail with eyes that seemed to see straight through flesh and bone to the truth beneath. "The elders have concerns. You bring danger to our village. White men came today because of you. Tomorrow more may come. Soldiers, perhaps. Men with many guns. Our people have suffered much from white violence. Why should we risk more for one woman?" Abigail's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You shouldn't. You've already given me more than I deserved. If my leaving would protect you, I'll go willingly. But I swear to you on my mother's grave that I stole nothing. The man who sent those riders is a thief and a liar who uses his power to destroy anyone who threatens to expose him. And yet, he has the law on his side," the old man said in surprisingly clear English. "He has papers, authority, soldiers. What do you have?" "The truth," Abigail said simply. "Only the truth." The woman with the bear claws leaned forward. "Truth does not stop bullets. Truth does not feed hungry children when soldiers burn our winter stores. Truth is a luxury for people who have power. We do not." The words struck like physical blows because they were undeniable. Abigail had seen it herself, the way truth meant nothing against force, the way justice bent and broke under the weight of money and influence. She had no counter-argument, no defense. Black Elk stepped forward, breaking protocol. Grandmother Willow's eyes narrowed, but she didn't stop him. He moved to stand beside Abigail, his presence solid as stone. 3 weeks ago, this woman defended us against armed settlers when she had no reason to. She could have stayed silent, kept herself safe. Instead, she spoke truth knowing it would cost her everything. And it did. Her own people cast her out. She came to us with nothing, asking only for a chance to prove herself. She came to us because she had nowhere else to go, the old man countered. Desperation is not the same as loyalty. Then watch her these past weeks, Black Elk continued, his voice gaining intensity. See how she works from dawn to dusk without complaint. See how she learns our language, our ways. See how she treats little Sage with kindness, how she shows respect to our elders. This is not desperation. This is choice. She chooses to be here, to be one of us. Grandmother Willow studied Black Elk with an expression Abigail couldn't read. You speak with great passion, grandson. Why does this white woman matter so much to you? The question hung in the air. Black Elk's jaw tightened, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Then he said quietly, "Because I am tired of watching good people be destroyed by those with power. Because I lost my wife and daughter to white man's sickness, and I could not save them. Because this woman stood alone against her own people to defend strangers, and that kind of courage is rare. Too rare to waste." The silence that followed felt sacred. Abigail blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the raw honesty in Black Elk's words, by the pain he had just exposed to the council. He had lost a wife and daughter. Little Sage wasn't his sister's son at all, was he? That had been a kindness, a way to explain the situation without revealing the full depth of Black Elk's grief. Grandmother Willow nodded slowly. "I see. The council will consider all that has been said. Abigail Monroe, do you understand what it means to truly become one of us? Not just to live here, but to belong. It means leaving behind your white identity, your white name, your white ways. It means accepting our customs, our beliefs, our fate. Whatever comes. Can you do this?" Abigail didn't hesitate. "Yes. With all my heart, yes. Even if it means you can never return to your own people. Even if it means fighting alongside us if soldiers come. Even if it means dying with us if that is what the spirits decree." "Yes," Abigail said again, and this time her voice didn't shake. "I would rather die as one of you than live as one of them." The elders exchanged glances, some subtle communication passing between them. Then Grandmother Willow stood, and everyone else rose as well. "The council has decided. Abigail Monroe will undergo the trial of becoming. 3 tests, 3 days. If she passes, she will be given a new name and accepted fully as Modoc. If she fails, she will leave this village and never return. Do you accept these terms?" I accept," Abigail said without knowing what the tests would entail. "Then it begins at dawn." Grandmother Willow's face softened slightly. "Rest well, child. You will need your strength." That night, Abigail couldn't sleep. She lay on her mat, staring at the smoke hole in the roof, watching stars wheel slowly across the visible patch of sky. Beside her, Little Sage slept peacefully, one small hand curled against his cheek. Across the dwelling, Black Elk sat by the dying fire, sharpening his knife with long, methodical strokes. "You should sleep," he said without looking up. "I can't. I keep thinking about tomorrow. About what the tests might be. The tests are different for each person. They are designed to challenge your specific weaknesses, to see if you have the strength to overcome them." Abigail sat up, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Black Elk, why did you speak for me tonight? You barely know me." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his knife and looked at her across the fire. "When my wife died, I stopped believing in much. I did my duty, cared for my nephew, hunted, fought when necessary. But I felt nothing, just emptiness where my heart used to be. Then I saw you at the trading post, defending people you didn't know, risking everything for what was right. And I felt something again. Anger, yes, at how your people treated you. But also hope. Hope that maybe the world hadn't become completely rotten. That maybe courage and honor still existed somewhere." Abigail's breath caught. "I'm not brave. I was terrified. Brave people are always terrified. That's what makes them brave. They act anyway." He picked up his knife again, returning to his work. "Sleep now. You'll need it." But Abigail stayed awake, thinking about his words, about the way he had looked at her across the council fire, about the strange warmth that bloomed in her chest whenever he was near. Dawn came cold and grey. Abigail was summoned to the lakeshore, where Grandmother Willow and the other elders waited. Morning Dove and Sky Woman were there too, along with several other village women. Their faces were solemn, ceremonial. "The first test is endurance," Grandmother Willow announced. "You will swim to the far side of the lake and back. The water is fed by mountain snow. It will test your body's strength and your mind's will. You may not stop. You may not call for help. You succeed or you fail. There is no middle path." Abigail looked at the lake. In the morning light it seemed vast, the far shore impossibly distant. The water would be brutally cold. She was a decent swimmer, had learned in her youth, but never anything like this. Fear coiled in her stomach. She removed her dress, standing in her shift, and walked into the water. The cold hit like a fist, driving the air from her lungs. She gasped, nearly turned back, but forced herself forward. When the water reached her waist, she dove. The shock was total. Every nerve screamed. Her muscles locked. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember how to move her arms, how to breathe. Then survival instinct took over. She began to swim, each stroke agony, her body begging her to stop. The far shore seemed to get no closer. Her arms grew heavy, her legs numb. Her chest burned from cold and exertion. She wanted to stop, to rest, but Grandmother Willow's words echoed in her mind. "You may not stop." So she didn't. She kept swimming, stroke after painful stroke, telling herself she could endure one more, then one more, then one more. Finally, her hand touched the rocky shore on the far side. She wanted to collapse, to lie on the stones and let warmth slowly return. But she had to go back. The test wasn't complete. She pushed off immediately, turning back toward the village. The return journey was worse. Her body had no reserves left. Every movement was an act of pure will over physical limitation. Halfway back, her vision started to blur. Her strokes became erratic. She swallowed water, choked, kept going. The shore seemed to retreat instead of approach, mocking her efforts. Then she heard splashing beside her. Black Elk had waded in chest deep, staying parallel to her course. He wasn't helping, wasn't touching her, but his presence gave her something to focus on, something beyond the pain. She matched her strokes to his walking pace, used his steady movement as an anchor. Her feet touched bottom. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Black Elk caught her before she fell, lifting her effortlessly and carrying her to shore. Grandmother Willow wrapped her in blankets while the other women built up a fire. Abigail shook so violently her teeth chattered, unable to form words. "You passed," Grandmother Willow said simply. "Rest now. The second test comes tomorrow." Abigail spent the rest of that day by the fire, drinking hot tea and slowly recovering feeling in her extremities. Little Sage sat beside her, telling her stories in Modoc that she was starting to understand. Black Elk came and went, bringing firewood, fresh water, a bowl of hot stew. He said little, but his concern was evident in every action. That night, the cold settled deep into her bones despite the fire. She couldn't stop shivering. Black Elk noticed and, without asking permission, lay down beside her, sharing his warmth. It should have been scandalous. It should have been improper. But here in this place it was simply practical, simply kind. Abigail felt his heat seeping into her frozen body, and finally the shaking stopped. "Thank you," she whispered. "Sleep," he murmured. "Tomorrow will be harder." The second dawn brought different challenges. Grandmother Willow led Abigail into the forest, deep into territory Abigail had never seen. They walked for hours, climbing steep trails, pushing through dense undergrowth. Finally, they stopped in a small clearing surrounded by ancient pines. "The second test is survival," Grandmother Willow said. "You will stay here alone for one full day and night. You have no food, no water, no fire. You must find or make everything you need. At dawn tomorrow, I will return. If you have survived well, you pass. If you have merely survived, you fail. Do you understand the difference?" But Abigail thought she did. Surviving well meant more than just not dying. It meant demonstrating skill, knowledge, competence. "I understand." Grandmother Willow nodded and walked away, disappearing into the trees. Abigail stood alone in the clearing, the weight of solitude pressing down. The forest was suddenly full of sounds. Bird calls, rustling leaves, distant animal noises she couldn't identify. Every shadow seemed to hold potential danger. She forced herself to think practically. First priority, water. She remembered the lessons Sky Woman had taught her about finding streams. She walked in widening circles, listening for the sound of running water, looking for the lush vegetation that indicated moisture. After 20 minutes, she found a small creek, its water clear and cold. She drank deeply, then turned her attention to shelter. The days were warming, but mountain nights were still cold enough to be dangerous. She gathered pine branches, propping them against a fallen log to create a lean-to. It wasn't elegant, but it would provide some protection from wind and dew. Food was harder. She found some cattail roots by the creek and remembered mourning dove showing her they were edible. She dug them up with a sharp stick, washed them in the creek and ate them raw. They were starchy and bland, but they filled her stomach. She also found some wild onions and a bush with berries that she was fairly certain weren't poisonous. As afternoon faded to evening, she gathered dry grass and wood for a fire. This was the real test. She had watched black elk make fire with a bow drill, but had never tried it herself. She found a straight stick and a flat piece of wood, fashioned a crude bow from a flexible branch and a strip of fiber from her shift, and began. It was brutally difficult. Her hands cramped. The stick kept slipping. She worked for what felt like hours, sweat dripping despite the cooling air, frustration building. Several times she nearly gave up, but then she remembered Black Elk's words, "Brave people act anyway." So she kept trying, adjusting her technique, learning from each failure. Finally, she saw smoke. Then a tiny ember glowed in the char. She transferred it carefully to her nest of dry grass and blew gently. The grass caught. Flame bloomed. She had made fire. That night, sitting by her small fire, eating her foraged meal, Abigail felt something profound shift inside her. She was not the same woman who had stood outside the trading post 3 weeks ago. That woman had been dependent, desperate, defined by her relationship to men and society. This woman was capable, strong, self-sufficient. She had survived on skill and will, and she had done it alone. The next morning, Grandmother Willow returned to find Abigail sitting calmly by a well-maintained fire, having just finished a breakfast of roasted cattail roots. The old woman walked around the campsite, examining the shelter, the food stores Abigail had gathered, the fire. Then she smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since Abigail had arrived. "You have done well, more than well. You have shown you can survive in our world with our ways. The second test is passed." Relief flooded through Abigail, followed immediately by apprehension. "What is the third test?" Grandmother Willow's expression grew serious. "The third test is the most difficult. It tests not your body or your skills, but your spirit. It tests whether you can truly let go of who you were and become who you must be. You will undergo the vision quest." They returned to the village, where preparations were already underway. Abigail was taken to a sweat lodge, a low structure covered with hides and blankets. Inside, hot stones glowed red. The air was thick with steam and the scent of sage. Skywoman and Mourning Dove helped her inside, then sealed the entrance. The heat was overwhelming, pressing down like a physical weight. Abigail could barely breathe. Sweat poured from her body. She felt dizzy, disoriented. Grandmother Willow's voice came through the darkness, chanting in Modoc, words that rose and fell in hypnotic rhythm. Time lost meaning. Hours might have passed, or minutes. The heat, the darkness, the chanting all combined to loosen Abigail's grip on reality. She felt herself drifting, her consciousness separating from her body. Images swirled through her mind, her mother's face, Howard's cruel smile, the wedding dress in tatters, Black Elk's scarred face illuminated by firelight. Then she was running through a forest that existed somewhere between dream and memory. Behind her, shadows pursued, dark shapes that whispered her old name, her old failures, her old fears. She ran faster, but they gained on her, reaching with grasping hands. A wolf appeared on the path ahead, silver-gray and massive. It looked at her with eyes that held ancient wisdom. When it spoke, its voice was Grandmother Willow's. "You cannot outrun your past. You must turn and face it." Abigail stopped running. She turned to face the pursuing shadows. As she did, they slowed, their forms becoming clearer. They were parts of herself, the frightened girl, the betrayed fiancé, the desperate refugee, all the pieces of Abigail Monroe that she had tried to leave behind. "I see you," she said to them. "I acknowledge you. You are part of my story, but you do not define my future." The shadows stopped, hovering at the edge of the path. Then slowly they began to dissolve, not destroyed but integrated, becoming part of her rather than separate from her. The wolf nodded approvingly and transformed into an eagle, soaring up through the trees. Abigail followed, her spirit rising with the eagle, higher and higher until she could see the whole landscape spread below. The trading post where she had been rejected, the forest where she had wandered lost, the village where she had found purpose, and ahead a path that led into unknown territory, full of challenges and possibilities. The eagle spoke again, this time in Black Elk's voice. "You are no longer who you were. Choose your new name. Choose your new path. I am Walking Rain," Abigail heard herself say, the name rising from somewhere deep within. "I am the storm that nourishes and the water that gives life. I'm Modoc." She woke gasping, lying outside the sweat lodge under the stars. Grandmother Willow sat beside her, smiling. "Welcome back, Walking Rain. The spirits have accepted you. You have passed the third test." The next day, the entire village gathered for the naming ceremony. Abigail, now Walking Rain, stood in the center of the circle, wearing a dress of soft deerskin that the women had made for her. Her hair had been braided with eagle feathers and shells. Grandmother Willow painted her face with red ochre and white clay, in patterns that told the story of her journey. "You came to us as Abigail Monroe, a white woman fleeing her past," Grandmother Willow announced in both Modoc and English. "You have proven yourself through trials of body, skill, and spirit. Today, you are reborn as Walking Rain, daughter of the Modoc people. Whatever comes, you are one of us now. Our struggles are your struggles. Our victories are your victories. Our fate is your fate." The village erupted in celebration. People came forward to welcome her, touching her shoulders, speaking her new name. Little Sage hugged her legs, grinning up at her with pure joy. The women who had taught her, who had watched her transform, embraced her as a sister. Black Elk approached last. He looked at her for a long moment, something profound and unspoken passing between them. Then he placed a hand over her heart and said quietly, "I knew you were strong, but you are stronger than even I imagined. Walking Rain is a good name. It suits you." That night there was feasting and dancing and storytelling. Walking Rain sat beside Black Elk and Little Sage, no longer an outsider, but a full member of the community. She had left behind everything she had known, everything she had been. But in losing her old self, she had found something far more valuable. She had found her true home, her true purpose, her true identity, and she had found, though neither of them had yet spoken it aloud, the possibility of love in the steady presence of the scarred warrior who had first said to her those fateful words. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. If you're brave enough. Come with me! Spring turned to summer, and the valley transformed into a tapestry of green meadows and wildflowers that stretched toward distant mountains. Walking Rain had been Modoc for 2 months now, and the rhythm of village life had become as natural to her as breathing. She woke with the sun, worked alongside the other women, laughed at Little Sage's increasingly elaborate stories, and fell asleep each night to the sound of Black Elk's steady breathing across the fire. But something was shifting in the world beyond their peaceful valley. Travelers brought disturbing news from the trading posts and settlements. More white families were arriving every week, claiming land that had been Modoc territory for generations. The army was building a new fort 3 days' ride to the south. There was talk of forcing all native peoples onto reservations, confined spaces where they could be controlled and monitored. Walking Rain noticed the change in the village's atmosphere. Council meetings grew longer and more frequent. Warriors spent more time checking weapons and practicing combat drills. Even the children's games took on a martial quality. Little boys playing at defending the village against imaginary invaders. One afternoon, while Walking Rain was teaching Little Sage to identify medicinal plants near the forest edge, Black Elk emerged from the trees with 3 other warriors. Their faces were grim, their postures tense. They had been on a scouting mission for the past 2 days, and whatever they had seen had shaken them. That evening, an emergency council was called. Walking Rain attended now, her status as a full member of the tribe granting her the right to hear and speak on matters affecting their future. She sat between Morning Dove and Sky Woman as Grandmother Willow called the meeting to order. Black Elk stood to report. We traveled south to the new fort. It is nearly complete, with walls of thick timber and positions for many cannons. We counted over 200 soldiers, perhaps more arriving weekly. They are building a supply road that cuts directly through our traditional hunting grounds. Murmurs of anger rippled through the gathered crowd. The old man from Walking Rain's trial, called Stone Bear, rose to speak. This is how it always begins. First they build forts, then they build roads. Then they tell us the land is no longer ours, that we must move to the reservation or be moved by force. We should attack them now, a young warrior named Red Hawk declared, his hand gripping his rifle. Before they grow stronger, show them we will not surrender our land without a fight, and bring the full might of the army down upon us. Grandmother Willow's voice cut through the rising voices. We are one village. They have thousands of soldiers. Attacking now would be suicide. Then what do you suggest? Red Hawk challenged, that we wait meekly for them to come take our children and march us away from our ancestors' bones. The debate raged for hours, voices rising in passion and frustration. Some argued for immediate military action. Others counseled negotiation and diplomacy. A few suggested abandoning the valley entirely and moving deeper into the mountains, where white settlers had not yet reached. Walking Rain listened to it all, her mind churning. She understood both perspectives. She had seen firsthand how white expansion worked, the relentless pressure that ground down resistance through sheer numbers and industrial might. But she had also seen the courage and skill of Modoc warriors, their intimate knowledge of the land, their willingness to fight for what was theirs. Finally, she stood. The council fell silent, all eyes turning to her. She was still new, still proving herself, and speaking in council was a significant act. I have lived in both worlds, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I know how white people think, how their government works. They do not see this as your land. They see it as empty space waiting to be filled. To them, you are obstacles to be removed, not people with rights and history. Then we have no choice but to fight, Red Hawk said. Fighting may be necessary, Walking Rain continued, but fighting without strategy is just dying. The army expects you to attack in traditional ways. They have prepared for direct confrontation, but there are other forms of resistance. Ways to make their occupation so costly, so difficult, that they choose to negotiate rather than continue. Stone Bear leaned forward with interest. What ways? Walking Rain's mind raced back to her days as a journalist, to the stories she had covered of labor strikes and civil resistance. Disruption. Make their supply lines unreliable, their roads impassable, their communications fail. Don't give them a single large battle they can win. Give them 1,000 small frustrations they cannot solve. Make them fear the forest, fear the night, fear every shadow. Not through violence, but through uncertainty. Grandmother Willow studied her with sharp eyes. You speak of a different kind of warfare. I speak of using their own fears against them. White soldiers are afraid of this land. They do not know it as you do. They see threats in every rustle of leaves. Use that. Let them imagine horrors worse than reality. A frightened enemy makes mistakes. Black Elk nodded slowly. There is wisdom in this. We know every cave, every hidden trail, every place where 12 men can vanish, while 100 search. We could make them believe we are everywhere and nowhere. The council debated long into the night, but Walking Rain's words had shifted the conversation. By the time the fire burned low, a plan had formed. They would not attack the fort directly. Instead, they would make the surrounding territory so unpredictable that the army would hesitate to expand further. It was not surrender, but neither was it suicide. It was something in between, defiance with strategy. Over the following weeks, that strategy was put into action. Warriors moved like ghosts through the forest, rerouting streams to flood the supply road, collapsing tunnel sections. leaving false trails that led nowhere. Supply wagons found themselves lost for days in terrain that should have been straightforward. Sentries reported seeing large groups of warriors that vanished when reinforcements arrived. Nothing overtly violent occurred, but the soldiers' nerves frayed with each mysterious incident. Walking Rain participated in her own way. She wrote messages in English and left them where soldiers would find them, letters that spoke of Modoc history and rights, of the treaties that had been broken, of the injustice of their displacement. Some soldiers, she hoped, might read those words and question their mission. Even one or two sympathetic voices within the fort could prove valuable. But such tactics could only delay the inevitable. One morning, a messenger arrived at the village, an old Modoc man from a settlement to the east. His face was hollow with grief and fury. "They came 3 days ago," he said, his voice breaking. "Soldiers and settlers together. They said we had to leave immediately, that the land had been designated for white homesteaders. When our chief tried to negotiate, they arrested him. When people resisted, they burned our homes. 5 of our people were killed, including 2 children. The village erupted in rage. Warriors grabbed weapons, ready to ride out immediately for vengeance. Grandmother Willow had to shout to be heard over the chaos. Stop, think. This is exactly what they want. They provoke us to violence, then use our response as justification for greater force. They murdered children." Redhawk roared. "How can we not respond?" I did not say we would not respond," Grandmother Willow said coldly. "I said we must think. Walking Rain, Black Elk, Stone Bear, come with me." In Grandmother Willow's dwelling, the 4 of them sat in heavy silence. Finally the old woman spoke. "The time for small tactics has passed. They are escalating. Soon they will come here with the same ultimatum: leave or die. We must decide now. Do we fight, do we flee, or do we go to the reservation? Or I will not live in a cage," Black Elk said flatly. "I have seen the reservations. People starving, children sick, spirits broken. That is not life. That is slow death. Fighting means quick death," Stone Bear countered. "We cannot win against their numbers. Perhaps we cannot win," Black Elk said. "But we can make them remember us. We can die with honor rather than fade away forgotten." Walking Rain's mind worked frantically, searching for a 4th option, a way out of this impossible choice. Then it came to her, a desperate idea born from her knowledge of white law and politics. What if we made them negotiate? Not out of kindness, but out of necessity? And the 3 Modoc leaders looked at her. "Explain," Grandmother Willow commanded. "The army answers to politicians in Washington. Politicians care about votes and public opinion. What if we documented everything? Every broken treaty, every unjust eviction, every murdered child. I can write it in English, in ways that white newspapers will print. If enough people back east read about what is really happening out here, pressure will build on the government to negotiate fairly." Stone Bear shook his head. "White people do not care what happens to Indians. They never have. Some don't," Walking Rain admitted. "But not all. There are abolitionists who fought to end slavery. There are reformers who expose corruption. There are people who believe in justice, truly believe in it. We need to reach them, show them that this is not civilization versus savagery. This is theft versus rights, murder versus justice. And while you write pretty words, more of our people die," Black Elk said bitterly. "Yes," Walking Rain said, meeting his eyes. "Some will die, but if we only fight, all will die. This way, maybe some survive. Maybe we force a real treaty, real negotiations. It is a slim chance, but it is a chance." Grandmother Willow was silent for a long time. Then she sighed, suddenly looking every one of her many years. "We will try both paths. Warriors will defend our territory, making the army pay dearly for every inch they take. But we will also fight with words and law. Walking Rain, you will write your account. We will find ways to get it to newspapers, to politicians, to anyone who might listen. It is, as you say, a slim chance. But slim is better than none." The next morning, Walking Rain began writing. She worked in Black Elk's dwelling, covering page after page with careful script, documenting everything she had witnessed and been told. The forced removals, the broken treaties, the children's graves. The burning villages. She wrote with clarity and passion, stripping away propaganda to reveal raw truth. Black Elk watched her work, bringing her food when she forgot to eat, adding firewood when the light grew dim. One evening he sat down across from her and said quietly, "You could leave. Go back to your world. Deliver this story yourself. You would be safe." Walking Rain looked up from her writing, shocked. "This is my world now. These are my people. I am not leaving. If the soldiers come, if we fight, you could die here." "You know that." "Yes," she said simply. "I know that. And I am still not leaving." Something shifted in Black Elk's expression, a wall finally crumbling. He reached across the space between them and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "From the first moment I saw you defending my people, I knew you were different. But I never imagined—" He stopped, searching for words. "I never imagined I could feel again. After my wife died, I thought that part of me was buried with her. But you brought it back to life." Walking Rain felt tears sting her eyes. "I love you," she said, the words emerging before she could question them. "I know it is complicated. I know there is so much uncertainty, but I need you to know. Whatever happens, I love you." Black Elk moved around the fire to sit beside her, pulling her into his arms. For a long moment, they simply held each other, two people who had found something precious in the midst of chaos. Then he tilted her chin up and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper, pouring years of loneliness and new hope into that connection. Little Sage's voice came from the doorway. "Does this mean Walking Rain is going to be my new mother?" They broke apart, laughing despite everything. Black Elk ruffled the boy's hair. "Would you like that?" Little Sage considered seriously. "Yes, she tells better stories than you, and she makes the corn cakes crispy like I like them." Walking Rain laughed through her tears and opened her arms. Little Sage rushed into them, and suddenly the three of them were tangled together, an unlikely family forged by circumstance but held together by choice and love. 2 days later, the lookout spotted dust on the southern horizon. A large force was approaching. The village erupted into controlled chaos, everyone moving to predetermined positions. Warriors took up defensive positions on the high ground. Women and children retreated to the hidden caves in the northern cliffs. Essential supplies were cached in secret locations throughout the forest. Walking Rain stood with Grandmother Willow, watching the preparations. "I should go to the caves with the others," she said. "No," the old woman replied. "You should be visible. When the soldiers come, they will see a white woman who has chosen to stand with us. It may give them pause, make them question, and if it does not, your presence here documents their violence against one of their own. Either way, you are more valuable here." Within the hour, a column of soldiers emerged from the tree line. At least 100 men, cavalry and infantry, led by an officer on a black horse. They stopped at the edge of the village, forming a battle line. The officer rode forward alone, carrying a white flag. Black Elk, Grandmother Willow, and Walking Rain walked out to meet him, also carrying a white flag. The officer was young, perhaps 30, with a mustache and eyes that held both determination and discomfort. He looked surprised to see Walking Rain. "I am Captain James Richardson," he announced. "By order of the United States government, this territory has been designated for white settlement. You are hereby ordered to relocate to the reservation at Clear Lake within 3 days. Any who remain after that deadline will be forcibly removed. This land has been ours for generations beyond counting," Grandmother Willow said through Walking Rain's translation. "Show us the treaty that gives you the right to take it." Captain Richardson shifted uncomfortably. "The treaty is a matter of federal law, not subject to local dispute. I am here to inform you of the decision, not to debate it." Walking Rain stepped forward. "Captain Richardson, my name is Abigail Monroe, formerly of Boston. I'm a journalist who has documented numerous violations of federal Indian policy. I have witnessed forced removals resulting in deaths of civilians, including children. I have evidence of corrupt land dealings and broken treaties. This information will be delivered to major newspapers and congressional representatives. How you conduct yourself here will be part of that record." The captain's face paled slightly. "You are white. What are you doing with these people? These people are my family. I'm Modoc now by choice and by right, and I am telling you, as someone who knows your world, that what your government is doing here is not just immoral, it is illegal. Treaties are federal law. Breaking them is a crime. I have my orders, Richardson said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then I suppose you will have to follow them, Black Elk said quietly. But understand this, we will not go willingly. You will have to kill us or drag us away in chains. And the world will know. She will make certain of it. Captain Richardson looked at the three of them, then back at his waiting soldiers, then at the village where women and children watched from doorways. Walking Rain saw the conflict in his face, the struggle between duty and conscience. Finally, he said, I will give you 5 days instead of 3. Use that time to reconsider. I do not want bloodshed, but I will do my duty if I must. He turned his horse and rode back to his troops. The column withdrew, but they did not leave entirely. They set up camp a mile away, close enough to monitor but far enough to avoid immediate confrontation. A temporary reprieve, nothing more. That night Walking Rain finished her account and prepared multiple copies. She gave them to trusted messengers who would carry them through different routes, ensuring at least one reached civilization. It was done. The story was told. Now they could only wait to see if anyone would listen. Black Elk found her sitting alone by the lake, staring at the moon's reflection on the water. He sat beside her in comfortable silence, their shoulders touching. Finally, he said, Whatever happens in the coming days, I want you to know you gave me back my life. Before you came, I was just existing, moving through days without purpose. You reminded me what it means to hope, to love, to believe in something beyond survival. You did the same for me, Walking Rain said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I was running from my past, defined by other people's choices. You showed me I could choose my own path, my own identity, my own future. They sat there until dawn, watching the stars wheel overhead, holding on to each other and the fragile peace of one more night before the storm broke. The 5 days passed like water through desperate fingers. The village fortified what could be fortified, cached supplies in hidden locations throughout the forest, and prepared for the worst while hoping for a miracle that seemed increasingly unlikely. Children practiced evacuation routes to the caves. Warriors checked and rechecked weapons. Women ground extra corn and dried meat for the siege they all knew was coming. On the 4th day, a lone rider appeared from the east, pushing his horse hard. He wore civilian clothes, but carried himself with military bearing. The lookouts challenged him at the forest edge, and he called out that he bore urgent news for the village council. Black Elk and 2 other warriors escorted him to Grandmother Willow's dwelling. The man was breathing hard, dust covering his face and clothes. My name is Thomas Garrett. I'm a clerk at the fort, but before that I was a newspaperman in Philadelphia. Miss Monroe, your account reached my desk 2 days ago. He pulled a folded sheaf of papers from his coat. I made copies and sent them to every newspaper contact I still have back east. But that's not why I rode here. Walking Rain felt her heart hammering. What is it? Captain Richardson received new orders this morning. They're not from the regional command. They came directly from Washington, from someone very high up in the Indian Affairs Office. The orders are explicit. Make an example of this village. Use whatever force is necessary. Leave no ambiguity about the consequences of resistance. Grandmother Willow's face remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened where she gripped her walking stick. When? Tomorrow at dawn. Richardson tried to argue for more time, tried to suggest negotiation, but he was overruled. He's a good man caught in a bad situation. He'll follow orders, but he hates what he's been commanded to do. Black Elk stood abruptly. Then we have tonight to prepare. Thomas Garrett, why did you come to warn us? You risk everything. Garrett met his eyes steadily. Because what's happening here is wrong. I took an oath to serve my country, but my country is supposed to stand for justice and law. This isn't justice. This is murder dressed in uniform. I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. You realize you can never go back, Walking Rain said quietly. They'll know you warned us. I know. That's why I brought everything I own in my saddlebags. He smiled grimly. I hear you could use someone who knows military tactics and can translate between worlds. I'm offering my services if you'll have me." Grandmother Willow studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "The spirits have sent you, we accept. Now tell us everything you know about their battle plans." Garrett spread out a map and began marking positions. "They'll come in 3 columns. The main force will attack from the south, where the ground is most favorable for cavalry. A smaller force will circle west to cut off retreat in that direction. The third group will hold the eastern approach to prevent anyone from escaping toward the other settlements." "They are boxing us in," Stone Bear observed, "driving us north toward the cliffs where there is no escape." "Except there is," Black Elk said, looking at Walking Rain. "The caves, the passages that run through the mountain. They don't know about those. We can move our people through the mountain and emerge miles away while the soldiers are still searching the village." "A fighting retreat," Garrett said, nodding. "Use your knowledge of the terrain to disappear. It could work, but you'll need to delay them long enough for everyone to get through the passages." "The warriors will hold the southern approach," Black Elk said. "Make them believe we are defending the village itself, while the real evacuation happens from the north." The plan came together quickly, refined by people who knew the land and the stakes. The women and children would begin moving through the caves immediately, guided by the elders who knew every twist of the passages. The warriors would stage a defense that looked committed, but was actually designed to buy time. Once everyone was through, the warriors themselves would follow, collapsing key sections of the cave system behind them to prevent pursuit. Walking Rain looked at Black Elk. "I should go with the women and children. Help guide them, keep them calm." "No," Grandmother Willow said firmly. "You stay with the warriors. When the soldiers see you fighting alongside us, when they see a white woman who chose us over them, it will shake their certainty." "Doubt is a powerful weapon." "She's right," Garrett added. "Soldiers are trained to see Indians as enemies, as less than human. That training breaks down when they see one of their own on the other side. It makes them question, hesitate. Those hesitations could save lives." Black Elk's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He simply looked at Walking Rain, with eyes that held fear and pride in equal measure. "Then you stay with me, always within sight." "Understood." "Understood," Walking Rain said, though her heart raced with terror at what was coming. That night, the village transformed into organized chaos. Families gathered their most precious possessions, though they could carry little. Parents held children and whispered reassurances that rang hollow against the reality. Warriors painted their faces for battle, each applying symbols of their clan and their courage. Walking Rain watched it all, committing every detail to memory, knowing she was witnessing the end of something precious. Black Elk found her standing alone near the lake, staring at the water that reflected the stars one last time. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. They stood like that for a long while, not speaking, just being together in the quiet before the storm. "I have something for you," he finally said. He reached into his shirt and pulled out a small leather pouch on a cord. Opening it, he revealed a ring carved from dark wood, inlaid with small pieces of turquoise. "This was my wife's. I thought I would never give it to anyone again. But you are not a replacement for what I lost. You are something new, something I never expected to find. Will you wear it?" Walking Rain turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, always yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she saw his hands were shaking. This warrior who faced death without flinching was trembling as he made this promise. She pulled him down and kissed him fiercely, pouring all her love and fear into that connection. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. "If we survive this," Black Elk said roughly, "I want to marry you properly. In both traditions, Modoc and White. I want the whole world to know you are mine, and I am yours. When we survive this," Walking Rain corrected, refusing to accept any other outcome. "When, not if," Little Sage appeared from the darkness, his face frightened but trying to be brave. "Uncle Black Elk? Walking Rain? I'm scared." They both knelt and pulled the boy between them. "It's all right to be scared," Walking Rain told him. "Brave people feel fear. They just don't let it stop them from doing what's right. Will you be with me? Little Sage asked. Every step, Black Elk promised. You, me, and Walking Rain, we are family. Family stays together. Dawn came too quickly, bleeding red across the eastern sky like a wound. The evacuation had begun hours earlier. Women and children filing silently into the cave system under the guidance of the elders. Now only the warriors remained, perhaps 40 men, and, to the shock of some and the pride of others, Walking Rain, she wore buckskin like the others, her hair braided back, her face painted with the same symbols. She carried a rifle that Thomas Garrett had taught her to use during the long night, and though her hands shook, her resolve was iron. She would not hide while others fought for their home. She would stand with them. The soldiers appeared as the sun crested the mountains, a long line of blue uniforms that seemed to stretch forever. Captain Richardson rode at the front, his face grim. When he saw the warriors arrayed across the southern approach, saw Walking Rain standing beside Black Elk, something flickered in his expression, regret perhaps, or recognition of the tragedy about to unfold. He raised his hand, and a white flag was lifted. Black Elk and Walking Rain walked forward to meet him in the neutral ground between the two forces. Up close, Richardson looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "Miss Monroe," he said quietly, "please, you don't have to do this. You can still leave. I'll guarantee your safe passage. These are my people, Captain. I'm exactly where I choose to be." He closed his eyes briefly, pain crossing his features. "Then I'm sorry, truly sorry. I was ordered to make an example. I tried to argue, tried to delay, but my superiors were adamant. If you resist, I am authorized to use lethal force." "We understand," Black Elk said, "and we will resist. This is our land, our home. We will not surrender it without a fight." "It doesn't have to be this way," Richardson said desperately. "The reservation isn't ideal, but it's life. You'll survive. Your children will survive. If you fight, they'll send more soldiers. They'll hunt you down. You cannot win." "Perhaps not," Black Elk replied. "But we will not live as prisoners. Better to die free than survive in a cage." Richardson's shoulders slumped. "I wish I could make you understand. I wish I could make them understand. But wishes don't stop bullets." He straightened in his saddle. "You have 1 hour to reconsider. After that, I must follow my orders." They returned to their respective positions. The hour stretched out, taut as a bowstring. Warriors checked weapons one final time. Walking Rain found herself praying to gods both old and new, begging for some miracle that would make this unnecessary. But the sun continued its climb, and no miracle appeared. When the hour ended, Richardson raised his sword. The blue line began to advance. They came slowly at first, maintaining formation, a wall of men and steel that seemed unstoppable. The warriors held their positions, waiting for Black Elk's signal. 50 yards, 40, 30, now! Black Elk shouted. The warriors fired, not to kill if they could help it, but to wound and frighten. Men fell, horses screamed and reared. The neat line dissolved into chaos. The soldiers returned fire, but they were shooting uphill against fortified positions. The advantage was with the defenders. For now, the battle that followed was nothing like the glorious conflicts of legend. It was noise and smoke and terror, punctuated by screams of pain and confusion. Walking Rain fired her rifle, aiming for legs and shoulders, trying not to think about the men she was hurting. Beside her, Black Elk moved with deadly efficiency, each shot placed with precision. The soldiers regrouped and charged again. This time they made it closer, before withering fire drove them back. But each wave brought them nearer, and each wave cost the defenders ammunition they couldn't replace. Walking Rain's rifle grew hot in her hands. Her ears rang from the constant explosions. Smoke stung her eyes and throat. Then Thomas Garrett appeared at Black Elk's shoulder. "The last of the civilians are through the caves." "Time to fall back." Black Elk gave the signal. The warriors began a fighting retreat, moving in coordinated groups, always keeping some rifles trained on the advancing soldiers. They drew the army deeper into the village, making them commit their forces, while gradually pulling back toward the northern cliffs. Walking Rain was helping a wounded warrior when she heard a familiar voice calling her name. She turned and felt the world stop. Standing among a group of soldiers at the village edge was Howard Pendleton. He wore a fine suit and a triumphant smile that made her blood run cold. "Abigail," he called, "or should I say Walking Rain? What a touching native name for a thief and a fugitive." Black Elk appeared at her side, his rifle instantly trained on Howard. "Who is this?" "My past," Walking Rain said bitterly. "The man I ran from." Howard stepped forward, apparently unconcerned by the weapons pointed at him. "Captain Richardson, I see the woman I described to you, the one who stole from me and fled west. I'm here to take her back to Boston to face justice." Richardson looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Pendleton, this isn't the time. We're in the middle of a military operation. On the contrary, this is the perfect time. You want them to surrender? I can make that happen. Give me the woman, and I'll convince them to go peacefully to the reservation. Everyone lives. Isn't that worth one thief's freedom?" Walking Rain felt Black Elk tense beside her. Before he could speak, she stepped forward. "You want me? Fine, but first, tell these soldiers the truth. Tell them how you embezzled from widows and orphans. Tell them how you destroyed anyone who questioned you. Tell them why I really ran." Howard's smile never wavered. "I'll tell them you're a hysterical woman who invented lies to cover her own crimes. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected banker or a woman who ran off to live with savages?" The ugly word hung in the air. Walking Rain saw several warriors tense, saw Thomas Garrett's face flush with anger. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, spiraling toward violence that would solve nothing. Then Grandmother Willow's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Enough!" The old woman had emerged from the cave entrance, her presence commanding immediate attention. "You white men come to our land with your wars, and your greed and your lies. You destroy everything you touch and call it civilization. We are leaving this place, not because we surrender, but because we choose not to become like you. We choose to remain human." She turned to Walking Rain. "Child, you are Modoc. Your past cannot claim you unless you allow it. You owe this man nothing. You owe his world nothing. Come, our people wait." It was the moment of choice. Walking Rain looked at Howard, at the life he represented, wealth and status and the chains of expectation. Then she looked at Black Elk, at the life he offered, freedom and purpose and love earned rather than purchased. The choice was not difficult. She took Black Elk's hand. "I'm Modoc. I'm staying with my people." Howard's face purpled with rage. "You stupid woman! Do you think they'll let you go? Do you think you can just walk away?" "Aubrey, watch me," Walking Rain said, and turned her back on him. What happened next unfolded in heartbeats. Howard pulled a pistol from his coat. Captain Richardson shouted a warning. Black Elk spun, pushing Walking Rain aside. The gunshot cracked across the valley. Black Elk stumbled, a red stain spreading across his shoulder. Walking Rain screamed and caught him as he fell. Around them, the warriors raised their weapons, and for a terrible moment it seemed like full-scale slaughter was inevitable. But Richardson moved faster. He drew his own pistol and fired not at the warriors, but at Howard. The banker crumpled, shot in the leg, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. Richardson turned to his men. "Stand down! Anyone who fires will answer to me personally." The soldiers hesitated, but their training held. They lowered their weapons. The warriors, seeing this, did the same. In the sudden silence, Richardson dismounted and walked to where Walking Rain knelt beside Black Elk. "I'm sorry," the captain said quietly. "This has gone far enough. Take your wounded and go. I'll report that you escaped through the caves and we couldn't pursue. It will buy you time, maybe a few weeks. Use it to get far away from here." Walking Rain looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why help us now?" Richardson looked at Howard, groaning on the ground, then back at her. "Because I just watched a supposedly civilized man try to murder a woman for refusing to be his property. And I watched you people, who we call savages, show more honor and restraint than anyone in a uniform today. I don't know what's right anymore, but I know this isn't it." He straightened. "Go, before I remember my orders." Thomas Garrett and several warriors lifted Black Elk carefully. The wound wasn't fatal, but he was losing blood. They needed to get him to safety quickly. Grandmother Willow led the way to the caves, the remaining warriors forming a protective guard. As they disappeared into the mountain, Walking Rain looked back one last time. She saw Richardson standing alone in the destroyed village, his face a mask of conflicted emotion. She saw soldiers tending to their wounded, no longer her enemies, but simply men caught in circumstances beyond their control. She saw the place that had briefly been her home, now abandoned to an uncertain future. Then Black Elk's hand squeezed hers weakly, and she turned away from the past and toward whatever future awaited them in the darkness of the mountain passages. The cave passages wound through the mountain like veins of some great sleeping beast, narrow and twisting, lit only by torches casting jumping shadows on stone walls. Walking Rain moved carefully, one hand supporting Black Elk, the other touching cold rock for balance. Behind them, the sound of warriors' collapsing tunnel sections echoed like distant thunder, sealing off pursuit. Black Elk's breathing was labored, each step causing him pain. The bullet had torn through his shoulder, missing bone but shredding muscle. He had lost too much blood, and his skin had taken on a greyish pallor that terrified Walking Rain more than any soldiers ever could. "Not much farther," Grandmother Willow called from ahead. "There is a chamber where we can rest, tend the wounded." They emerged into a vast cavern, lit by shafts of daylight filtering through cracks high above. An underground stream ran through one side, its water clear and cold. The women and children were already there, setting up temporary shelters, starting small fires. It was not home, but it was sanctuary. Walking Rain helped lower Black Elk onto a bed of pine branches covered with deerskins. Sky Woman appeared with her medicine bag, examining the wound with practiced eyes. The bullet went through clean. No pieces left inside, but he has lost much blood, and the wound must be cleaned or fever will come. For the next hour, Walking Rain followed Sky Woman's instructions precisely. They cleaned the wound with boiled water, packed it with healing herbs that made Black Elk hiss with pain, then bound it tightly. Through it all, Walking Rain held his hand, talking to him constantly, telling him he needed to stay with her. Little Sage huddled nearby, his eyes wide and frightened. When the medical work was done, Walking Rain pulled him close. "Your uncle is strong. He will heal. But he needs rest and time. Can you be brave while he recovers?" The boy nodded, though his lip trembled. "I can be brave." Over the next 3 days, Black Elk drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in fever dreams. Walking Rain never left his side, changing bandages, coaxing water past his lips, cooling his burning skin. She prayed to every god she had ever known. On the 4th morning, his fever finally broke. Walking Rain woke from an exhausted doze to find him looking at her with clear eyes. "You look terrible," he said, his voice rough but definitely his own. She laughed half-sob. "You look worse, but you are alive. That is all that matters. The village, the others? Everyone made it through. The warriors collapsed the tunnels behind us. The soldiers cannot follow. Captain Richardson kept his word." Grandmother Willow appeared beside them. "North, deep into the mountains where settlers have not yet reached. There are valleys there, hidden and rich, where our people lived long ago. We will return to those old places and make them new again." Thomas Garrett joined them, his face thoughtful. "I have another suggestion. Before I left the fort, I sent telegrams to newspapers in the east, sharing Walking Rain's account. The response has been significant. Congressmen are asking questions, reform groups demanding investigations. Public opinion is shifting. What are you suggesting?" Walking Rain asked that we use this moment. Document everything, get it published, force the government to negotiate in good faith. Recognition of land rights, establishment of protected territory. It is possible if we push while people are paying attention. The council debated long into the night. It was Grandmother Willow who finally tipped the balance. "We cannot run forever, but if we can secure our own land, recognized by their law, perhaps our grandchildren will have peace. We should try." The decision was made. They would send a delegation, led by Thomas Garrett and Walking Rain, to negotiate with the government from a position of strength, not surrender. 2 weeks later, Walking Rain stood at the cave entrance, preparing to leave. Black Elk had recovered enough to stand, though his arm was still in a sling. He pulled her aside. "I should be going with you," he said. "You are still healing. You need to stay here, protect the people. This is my path now, using the weapons I know best, words and truth." He touched her face gently. "When you return, and you will return, I want to marry you immediately. We have waited long enough." Walking Rain smiled through tears. "The moment I return, I promise." The journey east took 3 weeks. Along the way, Walking Rain gave interviews to every newspaper that would listen. She spoke at reform meetings, at churches, describing the forced removals, the broken treaties, the violence against civilians. But she also spoke of Modoc culture, of their humanity that white society so often denied. In Washington, they met with congressmen and bureaucrats. Walking Rain stood before a congressional committee and spoke for 2 hours. "You claim to be a nation of laws," she said. "Then follow them. The treaties you signed are legal documents. Breaking them is a crime." It took 3 months of negotiation. Slowly, painfully, a framework emerged. A protected territory in the high mountains, legally recognized as Modoc land. The right to self-governance. Protection from forced removal. It was not everything they wanted, but it was something real. The day the treaty was signed, Walking Rain stood watching powerful men put their names to a document that might give her people a future. Thomas Garrett stood beside her. "Now comes the hard part," he said quietly, "making sure they actually honor it." "That is why I'm establishing a permanent office here," Walking Rain replied. "Someone needs to watch them, hold them accountable." But first, she had a promise to keep. She traveled west as quickly as horses and trains could carry her. Autumn was turning the leaves to gold and crimson when she finally reached the mountains. When she finally climbed the hidden paths to the valley where her people had settled, what she found took her breath away. They had built not just a temporary camp, but the beginning of a real village. Sturdy structures of logs and stone, fields cleared for planting, irrigation channels from mountain streams. It was rough and new, but it was theirs. Little Sage spotted her first and came running. Then others saw, and a crowd gathered. Walking Rain held up the treaty document, her voice carrying across the gathering. "We have a home, legal, recognized, protected. It is ours now, not by permission, but by law. We won." The celebration was spontaneous and joyful. But Walking Rain's eyes searched for one face. Then she saw him. Standing at the edge of the gathering, his arm healed, his face breaking into a smile that transformed his usually stern features. She ran to him, nearly knocking him over as she threw herself into his arms. He caught her, spinning her around, and when he set her down, he kissed her with all the emotion of 3 months apart. When they finally broke apart, he said simply, "Tomorrow. We marry tomorrow. I cannot wait another day." "Tomorrow," Walking Rain agreed. The wedding took place at sunrise in a meadow filled with wildflowers. They combined traditions, honoring both cultures. Grandmother Willow presided over the Modoc ceremony, binding their hands with a cord woven from sacred plants. Then Thomas Garrett conducted a simple Christian service. Walking Rain wore a dress of white doeskin decorated with beadwork. Black Elk wore traditional warrior dress, his face painted with symbols of protection and joy. Little Sage stood between them, grinning, holding the rings they would exchange. When they spoke their vows, Walking Rain felt the weight of everything they had survived. "I came to you broken and lost," she said. "You gave me purpose and home and family. I promised to stand beside you, to fight for our people, to love you until my last breath and beyond." Black Elk's eyes shone with tears. "I was dead inside until you reminded me what it means to truly live. You brought light back into my world. I promised to protect you, honor you, and love you with everything I am." "You are my heart, Walking Rain." They exchanged rings. 2 rings, 2 cultures, 1 love. The celebration lasted all day and into the night. As the sun set, Black Elk led Walking Rain to a new dwelling he had built during her absence. Inside, a fire burned warm and welcoming. "I built this for us," Black Elk said. "A place to start our life together. What do you think?" Walking Rain looked around at the home built by his hands, filled with touches that showed how well he knew her. "It is perfect. You are perfect. This is everything I never knew I needed." In the months and years that followed, their life unfolded with both struggle and joy. Walking Rain split her time between the village and Washington, becoming a fierce advocate for native rights. She wrote articles and books, documenting Modoc history and culture. Black Elk led their people with wisdom and strength, preserving traditions while adapting to new realities. Little Sage grew into a bright boy who learned both languages and cultures. Walking Rain and Black Elk had 2 more children. A daughter they named Dawn Speaking, and a son they called Running Wolf. The village thrived. Protected by the treaty Walking Rain had fought to secure. 10 years after that desperate flight through the mountain caves, Walking Rain stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. Black Elk came up beside her, his arms sliding around her waist. They stood in silence, watching smoke rise from dozens of dwellings, hearing the sounds of children playing, "Do you ever regret it?" Black Elk asked. "Leaving your old world behind?" Walking Rain leaned into him. "Never. Not for a single moment. That world wanted to cage me. This world set me free." "You set me free. We freed each other," he corrected gently. Little Sage, now a young man, appeared on the path below with Dawn Speaking and Running Wolf. They waved up at their parents, calling them to come down for the evening meal. A family, a community, a home built on courage, choice, and love. Walking Rain took Black Elk's hand, and together they walked down the hill toward their children, toward the life they had fought so hard to build. She had come to this place broken and desperate, begging just to survive. He had offered her a challenge. "If you're brave enough, come with me." She had been brave enough. They both had been, and in their bravery, they had found not just survival, but something far more valuable. They had found home. They had found purpose. They had found each other, and that was worth everything they had endured to get here. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.